A short while ago, I was having a conversation with my friend Steven from the channel Steven Nonsense about remaking old cartoons. Stuff like Goldar and the Golden Lance, Thunder the Barbarian, The Centurions, which are amazing shows if you've never watched them. Black Star as well. I mean, Black Star is probably the first kind of cartoon like that I ever saw. It was mind-blowing at the time. I mean, a power sword and a star sword, and you can put them both together. Man, that blew my mind back then. Hot water also blew my mind back then. Color TV, food that didn't taste like dirt. How cool would it be to see those shows, those ideas live again, but in a modern setting? Steven was mentioning that he would wanted them to be made in live action and with real life actors, with actors that aren't full of themselves and, would actually do the job instead of acting like prima donnas and insisting that they get creative control over the characters also, probably no dwarves in Black Star because they would have been probably too cheesy, I guess. I don't mind them. I think they worked a bit as a light-hearted comedic presence in what is otherwise a world that is kind of gloomy and in constant war. But enough about that. Well, I'm making this show because of that. I just keep thinking, man, how cool would it be to remake the Centurions and instead of having them teleport the equipment from an orbital space station, you could have them carry around in briefcases. Well, actually, I think they did. Man, there were some episodes where they did have them in briefcases, and they could do it, Marvel Iron Man style with rocket-powered caches spread out all over the world. But anyway, Steven's probably gonna make a show about that since he handles movie cartoon stuff on his channel. We don't really do that on this channel. We should, shouldn't we? But it's called Gaming HD. So let's talk about games, about remakes and reboots. I've probably made like 2 top 7 games that should be remade. The second one I made by accident because I forgot about the previous one. But I know for a fact that in both of them, I said that why remake something that is already good? Why not remake something that didn't succeed at first? Why not remake something that could have been good but wasn't? I had forgotten that I said the same thing in the first show when I made a second top 7. Also, I ripped that off from the Nostalgia Critic, in case you're wondering. But the idea still stands. Remaking and rebooting games. When is it right to do so? When is it not? Well, I'm probably gonna carry some flack for this, but in terms of recent reboots, one that I was not a big fan of was the Tomb Raider one. There was still a lot to do and to say with the previous reboot of Lara Croft, and to be fair, the previous reboot of Lara Croft wasn't perfect, maybe. I mean, I wasn't a fan of the original series, I barely played it, but I liked what they did with it. It was an origin story for Lara, how she gets the impetus to become a Tomb Raider, but it doesn't get bogged down in the details of her learning her first steps. Instead, it shows you that from a young age, she was a total badass who could handle anything, and you believed it. Whereas the new Tomb Raider is at the 3rd game, and I think she's still becoming the Tomb Raider. I think that's part of the marketing of the game, that she is becoming the Tomb Raider she was meant to be, which she hasn't yet after 3 games. Though from the screenshots and scenes I've seen from Shadow of the Tomb Raider, she's mostly becoming the Predator instead of Lara Croft Tomb Raider, though they're taking the character and her journey, if you will, in a different direction than they could have if this was not a reboot. Now granted, it's not a great direction. As a character, I've only played the first one, but she was horrible in the first one. Hopefully she got better in the second one. Though from the trailers I've seen, she mostly got more murdery. Started to think that this series is mostly the origin story of a serial killer, more than it is the origin story of Lara Croft, the Tomb Raider, since, she was more about raiding tombs and artifacts and not stealth killing people in the jungle like she was Predator. But that's just one example of what I feel is a reboot maybe not handled well. A reboot that kind of misses the charm of the previous series, both of them. But then again, it is a reboot. If they were going to have the same charm, the same idea, the same substance as the original games, they would have just gone on with them. on a personal level, I wish they did. But that series is handled by, or was handled by Eidos that, fired everybody that worked on the game previously, and then got taken over by Square Enix that continued to fire people because they could. So what would make a good reboot? Well, to make one if the game deserved it. I still think that Ultima deserves a reboot, because Ultima has run its course. It's at the point where you can no longer tell stories in that universe. It is done, it is consumed, it is completely finished. I know they were going to make an Ultima 10 and there is the shard-based Ultima Online, but there really is nowhere you can go from there. There is value, I've said it in both shows I think, in making a reboot of Ultima because, well, time has passed, you can still have the same core ideas that Ultima did, the ones I made 3 shows about the philosophical angles, but you can enrich them so much more than they could have been back then with the limited technology they had. They couldn't even fit text into the game properly that, I don't know, had more than 10 lines. And you could use it to discuss different subjects. Because this is a world that is built around morality. It is a series built around morality, around your actions defining the world around you. And you could use that to talk about a lot of things. And you can do it in a non-condescending way because it's the Ultima series, that's what it was always about. You could do it in a non-preachy way, which again is what the Ultima series was about. It was about you eventually learning what it meant to be the Avatar and seeing how your ideas, the ones you're supposed to follow, how easily they can be twisted and turned to harm others. And it's the fact that it was made in 3 games that really sells it. Because you had time to get used to each and every one of them, to digest them, you had a period between them to think it through. Man, that deserves a remake or a reboot even. Doesn't even have to be an official one. People can make their own games with the same ideas. Because fundamentally, you're not tied to a franchise, to a name. That's the beauty of creative work. You can steal anything wholesale. And as long as you don't use the same names and you tweak the setting enough, you will get away with it. You will make something that to people not in the know will seem original and new and great, and to others will seem like you're rehashing the ideas that somebody else put forth a long time ago and you couldn't get the rights for them, or you didn't bother to, or they said no, and that if you use them they will walk all over your grave singing and dancing. It's a really great level of freedom that creative works have, because fundamentally you can't copyright the core theme of something, you can't copyright the ideas of a plot, you can't copyright character types. Now I'm sure that there's some lawyer out there rubbing his hands saying, not yet, but soon we will be able to copyright everything and then nobody can create things. Yeah, the lawyer is a vampire, because why wouldn't he be? I had a whole joke about it in the old news show, the one I rebooted and then realized I don't have time to make it anymore. Sorry about that, I just don't have time to make the new show anymore. I wish I could. I wish I still had time and I had the time to make it properly, like good. But as reboots go, it didn't work. The main reason I stopped making the new show back in the day, well, one of them, I was getting kind of tired, but also because I had fallen into a rut. I didn't have the necessary time to make it funny enough or good enough to compensate for maybe that week there not being any news I could really rag on about and make fun of and do something funny about. It became stale. I started leaning on jokes I once made that people liked and then kept repeating them. Ivan, for example, was a throwaway character invented for just one scene where I had to find somebody that would be offended for the removal of the torture sequence from the last Splinter Cell game. Because you know there's gonna be somebody offended by it. On the internet, somebody will always be offended by something, and that's how Ivan came about. He is a person that would be offended by a game removing a violent scene. A violent and, from what they said, disturbing scene. But people liked him and I kept reusing him to the point where he wasn't funny anymore. I tried to make him funny, I tried to make him fun, good characteristics, but he was primarily a one-joke character that got extended so much that he wasn't all that good anymore. And that kind of goes for pretty much every character I portrayed on that show. If you've only seen the English version, I had a bunch of characters that ran their course a long time ago. I mean, I'm mentioning this because I mentioned the vampires. Vampires is something that plays a part in the new show. Mark was originally a marketing director, then he got bit by a lawyer and became a vampire lawyer marketing director. He was gonna be bit by a politician next and become Satan, but for the most part he was a one-joke character. And the initial idea was to have a bunch of these throwaway characters that I could bring in for one show once every few months and then toss away, keep in a corner somewhere, and then maybe bring them back for when there was a good joke about them. But there was no time to make that many characters. I didn't have the creativity to keep on doing it properly. So at one point I stopped, and then I decided, you know what, a reboot would work. A remake. A soft reboot, if you will. And I thought I could do it. I really thought I could pull it off, but time constraints being what they are now, since, well, Steam is recovering a bit, it's almost not worthless anymore, so... Although I'm still gonna need a second job until I actually recover, so the new show is not coming back, sadly. But I thought I could do it, because when I started doing it, I did not have that many constraints on my time anymore. I thought it was possible, but I really underestimated the amount of work and creativity it actually takes to make it good. I had forgotten, and honestly I don't think I can pull it off, but I know somebody else can. This is a major problem with creative works. If you are the creator, you know your work sucks at a fundamental level. You always know that it was supposed to be better. You always know it was gonna be terrible no matter how much time you put into it. You know you're not able to make something that will be truly glorious, something worthy of the greats. Well, the greats may have thought up the same thing about their work as well. George Lucas is a great example of this. He was never satisfied with Star Wars, with how it came out. He constantly went back and tried to improve it and change it, and he made a mess of it, a total and complete mess of it. But that's because he was in a different position than the people watching the movies. He wasn't seeing what was on screen, he was seeing what was not on screen, what was left out, what was in the idea stage, what was filmed but not put in, what was cut out, what was left out, what was planned but never realized. So when a person like that has the chance to go back, to continue, to reboot, to remake, the result can either end up as being glorious. Sometimes it does happen. Some people may have the introspection level needed to actually pull that off, or it can end up as something completely horrible. Whereas someone that only sees what's on screen, that only sees what's there, someone like that has better chances of actually making something better, especially if they understand what's there, exactly what is there, not what's supposed to be there. So how does this tie into video games? Well, I'm not sure it does, honestly. I made the show mostly because I was talking with Steven about remaking and rebooting the Centurions, and then I started to realize that my reboot of the new show was kind of a mess, and it sort of ended there. So I'm gonna try and bring it back to video games. When should a game be remade? It should be remade when it is no longer playable, but still deserves to be played. In most games, even the crappy ones, at some level, may deserve to be played. I mean, someone put work into that. I say put work in that because looking at the Steam releases, some of them are just not really what you would call the work of passion of people that spent time to put together something they can be proud of them. But a lot of them deserve to be played, and that's one major reason why they should be remade. And if it's just a technical thing, then it should be a remake as close to the original as possible, but still playable on today's systems, maybe with some enhancements in terms of usability, if that usability doesn't take away from what the games were. For example, if a remake of Halo would have you be able to carry all your weapons at the same time, that would not really be Halo. Sure, it would be less annoying, but Halo's 2-weapon limit kind of defined it, so it would really be kind of awkward if it did have a feature in it that let a space marine capable of flipping a tank to carry more than 2 guns. When you think about it, it's super that he can carry more than 2 guns. I mean, he can bench press a tank. That's why he's in an armored and a space mutant in the first place. But if it's not just at a technical level, if it's a game that had an idea that was worthy of being played, but maybe wasn't done right, then yeah, it could also use a reboot. Take the idea, do it again, do it properly this time. Enhance it, expand it, or if the need calls for it, focus it on one small, tight element. When doing that, that, you pretty much have a guaranteed success for a reboot or a remake. No one's gonna get mad that you're trying to improve an original, trying to enhance it. They may get mad if you make Homeworld and instead of using the mechanics of Homeworld 1, use the mechanics of Homeworld 2, making some ships in Homeworld 1 useless, but that's a whole other matter. This show probably made no sense. Again, I think it's because of the heat. It's been very warm the last couple of months, and also I didn't really have a clear idea for a subject for today's show. Most of the ones on the list are rehashes of ideas I've already made into shows several times before, or they would be about how annoying Black Flag's missions are. I think I beat that horse to death already. I probably shouldn't try to get it anymore.